I lived in the fantasy of, everything is great. We'll get married. It'll be even greater. And very, very quickly, the wheels started to come off. What a man's part and role in all of this is unknowingly, they give their power away to their wives. Is that if I just work with a woman and teach her to take responsibility for her happiness and drop her walls, that good man she married is right there waiting for her. In this context, we have defense mechanisms because we don't want to be exposed for our own shortcomings and flaws and weaknesses. So for men, it's weak. For women, it's wrong. So our biggest defense mechanism that you guys can feel is our walls. And so we build walls around our hearts to protect ourselves from getting hurt. Is what it takes to have a successful, happy marriage is that each person has to be their own person and be responsible for their happiness.
Well, welcome everyone to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. We get into relationships and marriage specifically for lots of reasons. Maybe it's to find our soulmate or deepening a connection with that special someone. And then as the relationship grows, things start to change, don't they? Things that were once glossed over or not that big a deal now become big deals. And it's in these moments where as men, we're trying to be that good guy, that what we're doing is we're leaving ourselves open for and share and bearing our masculinity, only for it to potentially be trampled on. Now, we've done that because we've opened this door to be somewhat emasculated. And today's guest is going to share how wives emasculate their men. So I want you to stay tuned. This is going to be a really great topic. Now, before we get on to that, I want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform so you can stay up to date on our latest content while helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I just want to say I'm truly grateful. So with everything being said, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
So as you know, I like to start off with a couple of questions, and today to help us set the stage for the talk. So have you ever had that feeling that your wife was acting like your mother? And if so, what did you do about it? This is one of the ways where as men, we can feel emasculated. And for women, they may very well not recognize their behaviors are emasculating their men. And you see our relationships are a reflection of our early childhood learnings that if they're not recognized and addressed, can lead to destroying relationships after relationship. Well, everyone, we're going to shatter some myths today about what emasculation is all about, how both men and women can take responsibility for how they show up. And we're going to hear from a woman whose personal story about how this discovery for her saved her marriage. So allow me to introduce Karyn Seitz. Karyn is a former spiritual healer, and she realized that in her work that their clients weren't necessarily getting any better. And so frustrated by that lack of results, she recognized that something was missing, and what was missing was happiness. Now, Karyn's Awakened Marriage Program guides couples to finding deep, long-lasting happiness, intimacy, and connection. So welcome to the show today, Karyn. How are things?
Things are good. Thank you for having me, Alan. It's really good to be here.
Oh, really good to have you here. I was really excited when we had our pre-meeting just to talk about the subject today about emasculation and how all that has affected you in your life, but also how it shows up in other people's life and in your work. And so in my journey and the work that I do specifically with men, we always talk about everyone being on a hero's quest or a hero's journey. So I thought we'll start off with that today. And if you could tell us a little bit about your hero's journey and how that has shaped you and who you are today and the work that you do.
Thank you, Alan. I'll share about my journey in my marriage, because that personal journey for myself and what I learned about myself as a woman and being married to a wonderful man has really shaped what I do with others and how I'm able to help others. So I've been married about 8 years, and my husband and I have been together about 13 years. And, before we got married, I lived in the fantasy of, everything is great. We'll get married. It'll be even greater. And we got married in 2014. And very, very quickly, the wheels started to come off. The fantasy of what I thought marriage was supposed to be, some of which I wasn't totally clear with myself that that's what I wanted it to be. But as a woman, I grew up with the Disney fairy tale of I wanted my husband to be my knight in shining armor. And I wanted my husband to be the one that made me happy and completed me and gave me a life. And not only do we see that in the Disney fairy tales, but it's very much the culture we live in, right?
So true.
So that fell apart very quickly. And there started to be a lot of distance and disconnection between my husband and I. And I very much believed he was the problem and made him the problem. And I can remember having conversations of me sharing with him what I was so upset with in him and how I needed him to change, what I needed him to do or say to make me happy in the marriage. And bless him, he would try. And it was never enough. And so then it was, well, no, you're not doing it right this way, but I need you to do more of this. Well, you've stopped doing that. And again, bless my husband. And he was very honest and would say things like, I'm trying to do the things you're telling me to do, and it's still not enough. And then I would tell him he was wrong. Or he'd say, you don't ever listen to me. You don't hear anything I'm saying. And I would say, I do listen. Again, another message that he was wrong. And ultimately, where this led, I was very fortunate to meet my mentors a year into marriage. Thank goodness, because I was going to run it into the ground very quickly. And my mentor was very quick to help me see I was the problem. And I was the problem because I was unhappy in myself. I didn't value myself. I didn't feel good about myself. And I had put the burden on my husband to be all of that for me. And that's where I began to learn how I have walls as a woman and learn to take my walls down and learn to take responsibility for my happiness, which opened the door to see all the ways I emasculated my husband and made him wrong, what that was doing to him, what that was doing to our marriage, and what that was really saying and reflecting about me and my own relationship with myself.
Karyn, I just want to take a moment here and honor you for being so vulnerable with us here today, because what you're saying is so true for lots of relationships. And I want to thank you for being so raw with us, because I think it's important. While this podcast and my work is focused on doing men's work, our work is not to be done on our own. It's to be doing it in a relationship. And when we choose to be married or in a long-term committed relationship, then we also have our piece to own as men. And so I want to thank you for starting us off and being so raw with it and so vulnerable and pointing out to, the rom-com idea of what life's all about, right? Like I wrote down, like, you complete me. I think everybody's heard that in from a famous movie. And if that's our mindset going in, and as guys on the other side, then if we see ourselves that that's who we need to be to show up, that I need to be there to complete my wife, my partner, then I think we're approaching it with the wrong way. And while we're going to focus on, talking about how wives are emasculating our men, I want our audience to understand that we're to also bear in mind that it's not just that side of it. The other side of it is how us men. And so hopefully we're going to touch on both sides of this equation to understand, because I know you do work with couples, so it's not just with women. So
very much.
I want to thank you for that.
Of course.
So listen, why do you think or believe that a lot of women feel that their men are narcissistic? Now, is it because is it behaviors that we're displaying, or our actions or words? What is it, do you think, that maybe it started from your experience and the experience of your clients?
Great question. It's something that I hear not only from my female clients, Alan, but also I run a Facebook group for married women, and there's about 5,000 women in there or so. that has built over the years. And a common thing I see pop up all the time is my husband is such a narcissist. And then all the other women jump on the bandwagon. I think my husband is a narcissist too. And, just women I've worked with over the years, even single women, I can't find any good men. They're all narcissists. And from my perspective, I think there's a couple things going on. Mm-hmm. I think our modern day culture really enforces that. It's something that I hear come up in therapy a lot, where even therapists, well-meaning, jump on this bandwagon really quick. Well, maybe he's a narcissist. Mm-hmm. And in my experience and what I have learned from a woman's perspective, doing this work myself, working with a lot of different women, working with men, men come to me, my husband or my wife thinks I'm a narcissist. I don't understand. And from my perspective, what's going on is that as women, when we are unhappy in ourselves, we don't find our value in who we are. We don't find our self-worth in ourselves. We begin to look to a man or a partner to be that for us, to make us feel enough, to make us feel good about who we are, to give us a sense of value and purpose in ourselves. And they can't, because no one can do that for us. I teach, and I did not coin this phrase, but that happiness is an inside job, that we have to make ourselves feel good about who we are and then bring who we are into the marriage, into the relationship, not creating a codependency of needing our husband to fill that emptiness and void in who we are. So when they can't, we start to make our husbands wrong, which the term I use is emasculation, purposely, consciously, deliberately making your husband wrong and weakening him as punishment for what we think they're doing to us to make us feel bad about who we are. And what can happen is one of two things from the man's side, is that a man will do one of two things, and he might do both. The first is he shrinks down to his wife and he becomes a shell of a man. And that's his part. You talked earlier about what a man's part and role in all of this is. Unknowingly, they give their power away to their wives, and their responsibility, and what I teach in the course, is to take that power back and learn to respectfully and responsibly stand up for who they are to their wives. And when they don't, they become a shell of a man, and they literally or figuratively go into their man cave because they don't know how to stand up to their wife, or they're too scared. The other way a man can react is where then women think that their husband or partner, or men in general, are narcissists, is that a good man can also react and defend his sense of strength and defend himself, but not in the best way. Yeah. Because he hasn't learned or is poked and provoked to such a place where he reacts. And so he might react in saying hurtful things, or aggressively, or yelling, or seeming to be controlling. And as a woman, when we're blaming our husband for what we think they're doing to make us miserable and unhappy, we see that as narcissistic behavior. So in my own marriage, my husband did the first. He shrunk down and shrunk away in the relationship in the face of me emasculating him and constantly making him wrong, constantly making him doubt himself. I can look at my parents' relationship. My dad is a retired Master Chief from the Navy, and he's a wonderful, wonderful man, and he learned to defend himself and his sense of being a man in the Navy. Yeah. And so he reacted to my mom, and she's a woman too. It's not my mom being my mom, but I've learned this is universal in us as women and men. Yeah. But my mom was emasculating. She had walls, and my dad would defend himself and get angry. And I can remember him one time throwing a coaster at the wall, and, not at my mom, but he was provoked to that place. And that's when we start to think that our husbands are narcissists.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm just making a couple notes there, and I like the way you put that together. How we can we have the two ends of those spectrums of how we're going to react, right? And similarly, I think there's a lot of us that and some of the work that I do with men, I think that those of us that have been abused in early childhood, whether that's through different types of trauma, can tend to have those two types of reactions, and it's our protection. It's how we are able to sort ourselves in the world. And so neither one of them is more manly or less. The thing is that when we recognize the pattern, I think that's what you're talking about, is when we recognize the pattern that's happening, that now we can start to take responsibility as men of how we're showing up and how we're participating. Yeah. And so you started to touch on a little bit about, we're using this word emasculation. And I just thought we'd spend a couple of minutes now, on maybe describing more of what you mean by the word emasculation, and how, and put a better definition on that word for us.
Of course. Yeah. It's a strong word. Yeah. Emasculation. I want to acknowledge that. And as I started to see that in myself, Alan, in my own marriage, and with the help of my mentor, I don't believe I would have gone there on my own. I believe I would have continued to blame my husband for my unhappiness and believe that he was the problem in the relationship. And all of my friends, family, therapists would support me and enable me in that. So I'm very, very grateful for my mentors for helping me see this, because I wouldn't have coined it emasculation. I would not have known to look at it through that lens. And I think it's really important for men or women listening that this is meant to be a constructive thing to see within ourselves. I am not here to make women out to be the bad guy or anything like that. I'm sharing this with men and with women to give a whole new perspective that isn't taught in our modern day culture at all, or a very fringe part of the culture teaches these things. So it's to help people see a new way, because when we, like you just mentioned, when we can see our behaviors and shine the light on those, we can change them. If we don't see them, if we're in our stories, there's nothing we can do about them. So my understanding and what I teach about what emasculation is in the context of a woman being married to a good man, which I can also talk about here in a little bit, which I think is really, really important, because it's a foundation of what I teach men is to reconnect with who they are as good men. But in the context of a woman being married to a good man, emasculation is the deliberate and conscious deprivation of a man's masculinity, the conscious and deliberate deprivation of a man's masculinity. And how we do that as women, and also in working with hundreds of women around this issue, we know we do this. And the women that I work with, and like your audience, Alan, open-minded, willing to look at themselves, want to take responsibility, want to understand what they're doing in their marriages, what they're doing to themselves. And I have yet to work with a woman who hasn't admitted this. Or some of the women I work with are relieved to be able to call it out for what it is and be able to say, I know I do this. I know this is who I am, because now they can actually work on it and do something about it. They're not bad people. It's our protective mechanism. It's our protective mechanism from having to feel our own hurt and pain within ourselves that we have shut off. And how we emasculate, how we consciously, deliberately deprive a man of his masculinity, double standards. I need you to do this, but I don't have to do it. I want you to call me when you're going to go spend time with a friend and let me know 24 hours in advance that you have plans. But it's okay for me to call 5 minutes before and say, hey, I'm going to be an hour later coming home from work. I'm going to go see Jessica or whatever.
Yeah.
And right. So just as an example of double standards, gaslighting, that, my husband, again, I can't say it enough, what an incredible man he is, has been willing to speak up and say, you're really confusing me with what you're saying. I don't understand what you're trying to ask of me. I don't understand what you're trying to get me to understand. And then gaslighting me, saying, what are you talking about? I'm being completely clear. You're the one not wanting to hear this. You don't understand me, and making him feel crazy. Saying little comments, little jabs. I love what you said in the beginning. Have you ever felt like your wife is your mother? So treating our husbands like children and constantly nagging them, nitpicking. A book, I don't recommend a lot of books, because I believe finding our answers and going within and going into life to understand our experience and grow and learn. I used to be a self-help book junkie. So I don't recommend a lot of books these days, because that has changed for me. Yeah. But a book that has been quintessential in me understanding emasculation and understanding how I do it as a woman, and hearing other men's stories talk about it, has been Dr. Laura's book, which you either love her or hate her, I know. But she has a book called The Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands. And that book, I mean, I would have scoffed at that, Alan, 10, 15 years ago, if anyone had even mentioned that title of the book to me. But it was being open-minded and wanting to learn and wanting to see how I emasculated my husband. That book was key and foundational to understanding myself, and seeing it and reading through it was like, oh my gosh, I do that. I do that. I do that. Withholding sex is a big way we emasculate in marriages as women, or using sex as a weapon against our husbands.
I was just going to say, as a weapon as well, for sure.
Yeah. So there's, I could go on for days about, and I won't.
You're leading right into the next, next question, was to start to unpack, like, what are those behaviors, actions, words that wives do, that wives and partners do to emasculate their men. So we already touched on a couple, right? We talked about treating them like their children, right? So I feel like I'm married to my mom, and that's a different conversation as well.
It is, right? Definitely.
And then, withholding sex, for sure, or using it as a weapon, is definitely a tool in a woman's toolkit that can be utilized. But what are some other ways that's happening? The double standard you just talked about.
Yeah, the double standards. One I used to do, which was talk behind my husband's back to his mother, another emasculating, a big emasculating figure in a man's life. And I would go behind my husband's back and talk about his issues and problems with his mother, and try to get his mother involved to try to get him to change. Talking behind his back to girlfriends, or not talking, I would use the word venting or complaining, or the B word.
We were all thinking
to girlfriends, making my husband feel wrong and bad for wanting to go have guy time, or wanting to go engage in his hobbies. How dare you go take time for yourself when I'm here doing all of this, and look at all what I do. Playing the martyr and making a husband feel like he's not doing enough. Never thanking. That's one big thing I saw, Alan, was that I never thanked my husband for how hard he worked, for the things he's done to support me and me following my dream, and going after what I want in my career and my life. Never appreciating him just for his kindness and gentle-heartedness, and just who he is as a person, and just constantly really telling him what's wrong with him all the time. Or if he tried to bring something up in the relationship that was bothering him, and telling him why that wasn't an issue and why he shouldn't feel that way. That's a big one, is making your husband wrong, or being, for your audience, being made to feel wrong by your wife for how you are expressing what you're feeling, and being told that your feelings are wrong and you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah. That's such a powerful one. I'm glad you brought that one up, because I think there's a nuance there that I'd like to unpack a little bit. I think as men, we have to be conscious. We need to be conscious of not necessarily what we're saying, but how we're saying. We need to be conscious about what our beliefs are, and also how we're delivering it, because the relationship, when we get into these into these kinds of conversations. And I did a podcast on having crucial conversations and how we can be, present and understanding triggers and the things that are happening, I think is what causes the relationship to struggle. And that's why on the either end of the spectrum, when as men, whether we're falling into our man cave and really disassociating, and that was really my style. My style was to disassociate, and I used the old adage of, well, how will this matter in a year from now, or is this the hill I'm going to die on? And when we use that, that's a great platitude in the moment. If that's what you need to dial that energy down as a man, so that you can be more present and say what you need to say. That's still truthful, honesty, and respectful of our spouse without being aggressive. But it's not it turns into a platitude and a way to hide when we use those types of things, right? It really turns into an excuse. So we don't deal with it and we push it off. Yeah. And so that's why in our opening, I really wanted the audience to understand that while we're talking about the things that our wives are doing, as men, we're also aiding and abetting in this piece. We own our piece. We need to understand that we own our piece as well. And it's about finding that path, that common path. So both people in the marriage, in the relationship, can grow as individuals so that we can love, honor, and respect each other, and especially ourselves. And so this is I think this is why I really wanted to have this discussion with you. I think your work in this field is so needed. And it's great that it's coming from a woman's perspective, as opposed to, me having this conversation, because you bring the truth within everything. Like you've lived it, you work with women as well as men, and it helps us to get a better handle on, okay, well, what's really going on with my wife? I'm trying to figure this out and I can't figure it out. And it helps open that door for us.
Yeah, of course. That's one of the things, Alan, that I share with my male students and clients, is that as a woman working with lots of women, seeing this as the emasculation of our husbands as a universal issue and protective mechanism that we use, is that a man can trust me and pulling back the curtains and saying, this is what's going on, because this is a really important piece of what I teach, is that this is for good men. Yeah. And one of the very first things I do, Alan, when I work with a man in his relationship or marriage, is I have him define himself as a good man. Mm-hmm. Because what has happened in the emasculation in the marriage is that he is disconnected and believed into his wife's perception of him, that he is the problem, that he is wrong, and he's disconnected from knowing himself as a good man. And what's fascinating to me is that when I do this, every description from one of my students of themselves as a good man sounds very similar from the one man to the next, to the next, to the next, because it's who you are in your nature. Yes. That in your nature, you are kind, thoughtful, responsible. It doesn't mean that you're perfect, but that your nature is thoughtfulness, kindness. You want your wife to be happy. You genuinely want what's best for her. And what happens on our side as women is when we emasculate you and take away your strength and sense of being a good man, is that then you maybe don't show up in those ways.
Yes.
But it's not from a malicious, intentional place. It's actually a consequence to the wife of her behavior and how he's showing up. And what I see is that if I just work with a woman and teach her to take responsibility for her happiness and drop her walls, that good man she married is right there waiting for her, because it's who you are in your nature. And that to me is fascinating and a really important piece I wanted to share.
Love that. Just love that, Karyn. I think it's so true, and it's really important that everyone's getting this message. And what we're saying here today for the audience is that for the core requirement here on the men's side is that we are good men.
Yeah.
So this doesn't mean that does mean that you may be in a relationship as a woman, and it truly is a bad relationship. We're not talking about those kind of men today. We're talking about the men who are good men, and they can define that for themselves, and they know what it looks like, and they know how it should be. And that's what the focus is on this conversation, is about being good men. We're not talking about there are those folks that just need that need some help, need some work, and are struggling in relationships that truly could be in narcissistic, codependent relationships. And we're not talking about those. We're talking about the good people that are in relationships, and they're working their way through the challenges of being in a relationship and trying to understand how to elevate themselves to have a much stronger presence. Now, you started to touch on a little bit about women having defense mechanisms, and in how they may go ahead and emasculate men. So, tell me a little bit more about what you mean by the defense mechanisms. What's all that about?
Well, our biggest defense mechanism, and when I say defense mechanism, especially in this context, and then I'll talk about the biggest defense mechanism that we have as women. But in this context, what I'm talking about with defense mechanism are the behaviors that we have, all of us have as humans, but obviously we know men and women are different. Mm-hmm. And as women, we have different defense mechanisms than men, and we have some shared ones just in general that are universal in our humanness from my perspective. In this context, we have defense mechanisms because we don't want to be exposed for our own shortcomings and flaws and weaknesses. We don't want to be exposed for our own shortcomings, flaws, and weaknesses. As women in general, we are deeply protective of being exposed as wrong. Mm. We are deeply protective of being exposed as wrong. We will do anything and everything to be right. I associated being exposed as wrong, which really does mean not correct or not right. We're not always right, but that's not how we perceive it as women. As women, and I can speak from my own personal experience, being wrong is the equivalent of being annihilated.
Wow.
And that's how deeply protective we are against it. Just as, and I can't speak from experience, but I can speak from what my mentor has taught me and what I have learned in working with men. Just as for a woman, being exposed as wrong is the worst thing possible. For men, what I have learned and with working with my mentor and working with my male students is it's being exposed as weak. So for men, it's weak. For women, it's wrong. So our defense mechanisms are we don't want to be exposed as wrong. And that's something I hear a lot when I talk with men is like, I'm always wrong. Always, no matter what I do, she's always right. I'm always wrong. There's a great picture I saw of a newlywed couple that said, oh, no, I'm not going to remember it, but the groom was holding a pillow, the bride was holding a pillow, and it was like, I'm with Mrs. Right or something like that. Like, I don't remember it exactly right now, unfortunately, but it's a really good one. And so our defense mechanisms are against that. And our biggest defense mechanism that we have as women, that's important for men to know about, because I know you feel it. I used to think my husband couldn't feel anything, and he had no idea what was going on with me, and that he couldn't sense where I was at or what I was doing. And I couldn't have been further from the truth. What I've learned is good men are actually incredibly sensitive to what's going on with their wives, and you feel it. You might not always be able to put a finger on it and pinpoint it, but you can feel when our mood shifts, like everything was fine and then now it's not. And it's like, oh, what did I do? Like, what did I do wrong? So our biggest defense mechanism that you guys can feel is our walls, and how we put walls up and we become very distant. I called myself the ice queen, become very cold. And I would put a smile on my face and pretend everything was fine. But that was not what my husband would feel. He would feel my walls. And so we build walls around our hearts to protect ourselves from getting hurt, because we've never learned how to process the natural, inevitable hurt that we face in life, because it's just the nature of life. So as women, our biggest defense mechanism is putting walls up. And that shows up as being controlling, being a nag, nitpicking, constantly finding things wrong that our husband is doing, making him feel bad for our own past experiences, putting the responsibility of our emotional state on them. I wanted my husband to understand my every mood. That's not possible. That's not even realistic. I need to be responsible to understand my mood and get myself back into good space. That's not his job.
Yeah.
And I often share good men are simple. And I mean that in the best way possible. You guys are pragmatic, you're problem solvers, you see things clearly. And as women, we make things incredibly complicated, and it's impossible for you to understand our moods and what's going on emotionally, because that's not your experience. So that in itself is a defense mechanism, and it all stems from my perspective and what I teach and what I've learned from our walls and the ways that we protect ourselves.
That was incredible. Those are truly defense mechanism. And you know what? You started off with sharing about how women are afraid about being exposed, about flaws, weaknesses, right? And shortcomings. It's no different for men.
Yeah.
You know, the last thing we want to be told is from our wives is that we're not good enough. And whatever that good enough looks like, whether that's from a financial perspective to taking care of the household, whether that's being a good father, a good husband, whether that has to do with intimacy or not, all of us, men and women, we struggle with being exposed. And it's because none of us were raised in perfect homes. None of us had perfect childhoods and upbringings. And so we've learned these behaviors, and we have to unlearn some things that we thought were truths about how it is to be in a relationship. And that's why it's so important that we're having this conversation today, and that we're able to put some light on why it's so important for us to understand how both partners can take responsibility. And that's the other thing I love that you've been saying all throughout today's talk, is about about women needing to take responsibility. And, you know, I always say in my work is that I know a man's ready to change when he's ready to take responsibility for who he is, for where he is, and for what he aspires to become. And the moment that we can take, and I think that's so true for women as well, the moment we can take responsibility for everything around us, and that what shows up, then we can truly create change. But the moment that we're still going to say, well, I think that's her fault, or I think that's his fault, or that's something else, then we're giving away our power, and we're not owning who we are as individuals.
Yeah.
So you've done all this work now, and you're doing some couples work. I love that. I love to see that. So what does it take to have a successful and happy marriage?
It's really simple. I know we make it very complicated. And there's a lot out there, all well-meaning, and I believe people have to find what works for them. But the only thing that has worked for me, the only thing that works for my students and the people that I work with, is what it takes to have a successful, happy marriage is that each person has to be their own person and be responsible for their happiness. It takes, and this is what I teach to my female clients, again, just because our issues are different. When you are happy, you will have a happy marriage. And here's why. Because, and I've never had a man argue with me on this. I've never had a woman argue with me on it. We have sayings in our culture, and we laugh about them, but we laugh because they're true. All a good man wants is for his wife to be happy. That's all, right? It's all you want. Yeah. Is for us to be happy. I often give that assignment to my female clients. Please go ask your husband, or even just women I talk to, and whether we end up working together or not, please go ask your husband what he wants most for you. I would bet $1 million on what I believe he is going to tell you. And inevitably they come back, well, he told me he just wants me to be happy. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And what happens when a woman takes responsibility for her happiness and she's happy, which just in my context and what I teach means feeling good about who you are and just wanting to be you and wanting the life you have. It's a state of being, not an emotion.
Yeah.
That when a woman learns how to be happy in herself and takes that burden and responsibility off of her husband, he steps up and becomes the knight in shining armor you always wanted him to be. It's just not in a codependent way. It's just the natural dynamic between men and women. And so that is what takes a happy, successful, or that's what it takes to have a happy, successful marriage is, to me, in my perspective, the woman needs to be responsible for her happiness.
Yeah.
And a man stepping up and standing strong in himself in a respectful, responsible way. And both people, both man and woman or individuals, not being intertwined and enmeshed with each other. That you are each your own person on your own journeys, choosing to walk those journeys together. And one of my mentors, I have two, and they're partners, and who I've learned so much of this from, that I am eternally grateful. One of my mentors says it's like they're living in two houses with one roof, and that is what I have found makes a happy, successful marriage, and making it about growing and learning about yourself and from each other, bringing who you are into the marriage, not being who you think you need to be for the other person, but being who you are, and using marriage as a way to grow and learn. I often say my marriage has been my greatest spiritual journey to teach me about who I am and allow me to grow into who I am meant to be, that I believe God put me here to be. And I couldn't do it without my husband, and I couldn't do it without him being exactly who he is.
Yeah.
Because that's what I need to learn and grow and become the best version of myself.
Outstanding. Just powerful. Such a powerful conversation we're having today, Karyn. Just love it. So listen, I wanted to wrap up with this one last question for you. Of everything that we've talked about today, what is the one thing, and maybe we haven't talked about it yet, but what would be the one thing that you would recommend as a takeaway for our listeners to remember?
For your audience, and mainly being men and good men who want to work on themselves, trust what you feel in your marriage. Trust what you feel from your wife and what's going on. That if you're feeling like the crazy making is happening, if you're feeling confused by what she's saying and not following, and feeling like you're in a trap, feeling like you're being made to be wrong, trust that. Because what happens is you question it, and then that's where you give your power away to say, maybe she's right. And that's where you doubt who you are. So trust what you're feeling. The other thing I have to add is that what I'm talking about, what Al and I have been talking about today, and seeing the ways that your wife shows up, validating what's happening, validating the emasculation so you don't feel like you're crazy, is your wife is your greatest teacher. She is not a bad person. I want to again make it very clear what I'm talking about, and exposing and pulling the curtain back about how we show up as women. We're not bad people. Emasculation is not the nature of who we are. It's our protective nature. But underneath that and underneath our walls, we are soft, kind, lovely, nurturing, wonderful people. But we aren't good people when we've got our walls up and when we're emasculating. But that, for a good man, becomes your greatest teacher, because when you walk into that and you face it and you use the emasculation as a way to strengthen who you are and expose your weaknesses, then there is no hard feelings towards your wife. You actually become grateful. And it also becomes, when you learn to stand up for yourself again in a responsible, respectful way, where you're grounded in yourself and not giving your power away, that's where you fight for your marriage, because you'll see, your wife will see, oh, my games aren't going to work anymore. Or she'll say, screw this, I don't like who you're becoming. But then you'll know the truth of your relationship. But she's your greatest teacher to become strong in yourself and regain your sense of being a good man. And if you guys can find that dance together, this is what marriage is about, and how we grow and learn. And that's what I wanted to end with.
Bravo, 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 bravo. What a powerful conversation we've had today. I want to thank you so much, Karyn, for spending time with me today. Emasculation is not something women want to do in a relationship. And for men, when we can recognize the signs of emasculation, we can step into a role of support to help guide the relationship to be back on track. Now, it takes both individuals to participate. And I think today we've shown just how couples can do that. So I'm going to leave you with one final question, Karyn. How could our audience get a hold of you, get in touch with you, and participate in any one of your courses?
Sure. So you can reach out to me at Karyn Seitz, it's Karyn, but KarynSeitz.com/meet, where you can schedule a free get to know you call with me. And we can talk a little bit more about this, talk a little bit about what's going on for you and your marriage, and see if my marriage course can help. I have a marriage course for men and a marriage course for women, because we have different issues. So it's not something you necessarily go through together, although you could go through at the same time. And that's been very powerful for my couples I've worked with who have done that. Nice. But if this speaks to you and you're listening and, oh my gosh, this is me, I would love to talk, and you can schedule a time to talk with me again at KarynSeitz.com/meet.
That's perfect. Beautiful. So what I'll do is I'll make sure all that information and plus other info, all of Karyn's social media contacts, everything will be in the show notes. You'll have an opportunity for folks to reach out, and I encourage you to do that. It was such a fantastic conversation today, Karyn. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan, and thank you for what you are doing and giving me the opportunity to share this important message.
I was grateful. Thank you so much. So here's a few takeaways I've had from listening to Karyn's talk today about being emasculated. I think it's important to understand that word has so much power to it. And that as men, when we feel that we're being emasculated and we're giving away our power, that we have to take responsibility for that occurring. And how we do that is going to be a bit of a dance between how our relationship looks like today and where we want it to evolve to. And Karyn was able to share with us some ways that we can do that. And it's about standing forward and standing strong in who we are and being able to describe what a good man means to us. And then being able to take and have those conversations with our spouses and our wives in order for us to move the relationship into a higher level of being. Now, if you would like a little bit more help with that in getting to a point where you can show up as the best man that you can be, whether that be a father, a husband, entrepreneur, or a brother, then I'm going to encourage you to participate in our 90-day mentoring program. It's called the Hero's Quest. You see, every one of us is on our own hero's journey, aren't we? And in this program, we're going to focus on elevating all aspects of your life. Now, I know not all men are going to be a fit for this, and that's because not all of us are ready to take advantage or take responsibility, I should say, for who we are, for where we are, and for what we aspire to become. But if you're that man, if enough has finally become enough, and you're ready to take responsibility completely for your life, then I encourage you to participate in the Hero's Quest. And to make it easy for you, I'm going to leave a link for you in the notes for you to be able to click. You can have a one-on-one call with me. We can talk about how that looks for you, and we can start working on generating and creating a life of purpose and meaning. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Aho, my brothers.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man Podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.